Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Mr. New Dad. I hope you're having a great morning so far. Today is an exciting day because I have a good friend of mine. He's a ministry leader. He's a pastor. He's a coach. He's worked with men for several years, and he's a dad. And so I'm excited to bring him on, Michael Morisi. I've known him for several years. We've served on the local prayer breakfast board of directors for almost 5 years now. But I think he's got an excellent story. He certainly has wisdom. But we're talking about the central question today of how is being an involved dad really that hard, and how can we get out of our own way to be an involved dad? So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good morning, John. How are you,
Uh,
man?
I'm great. I'm in a season of new dadhood myself. I have
Yeah,
almost an 11-month-old who's walking all over the place, and he's keeping me on my toes.
I bet he is. I remember those
Hmm.
days.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for agreeing. I've been wanting to bring you on to the interview you for a while now because I think that you have such a heart for men. You've worked with men in many different seasons, whether it's been as a pastor, a coach, a ministry leader, and you've witnessed to several men. So I think that you can answer this question, and you're a dad, but you can answer this question of uh, is being an involved dad really that hard? And why do we make it so hard?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Of course, it's hard. It's difficult. I don't know that we make it hard. I think a lot of it has to do with who we are as guys. We have a mission, we have a plan, and we go after it. I'm probably a lot like you. By the time I get up in the morning, by 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I already know pretty much what my day is going to be like. I know how much time it takes me to get between point A and point B. And being a dad, especially to a newborn, or especially at your son's age, where now they're becoming so active, it just disrupts everything because they don't live on a timetable. They don't sleep on a timetable. They don't eat on a timetable. And so we are constantly having to adjust. And I just don't think as men we do that very well.
No, I don't think we do. It can be. I think that's a big thing. I would say for new dads is having that like you learn as you go, and I think a lot of guys do that. And I think especially in this season, I don't know what I don't know, and so this is
Hmm.
the first time that I've ever fathered a 11-month old. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a learning process.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's one that requires a lot of flexibility, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding. And of course, we love our children. The other thing that you'll hear a lot of dads say, is at 11 months old, until they really start talking and interacting with you as dad, you're kind of like, it's like you love them to death. I mean, you really enjoy those moments with them, but you know, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but they end up becoming almost like it starts to distract so much of what you had planned in your day that it becomes a little bit more difficult if we allow it to be, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. So, you've been a dad for several years, and you've got grown children. You've got, two young boys. Um, what have you learned, in the last, I don't know, 25 years when it comes to being that dad and being flexible, but then also showing grace? And, I'd really like to hear the stories of how you learned to be that involved or engaged dad now versus when you were, young and learning as you went.
Well, I can't take any credit for it. It really is the Lord, but I will go back and say that at 25, when I first started having children, I was really all about work. I was, as most guys that age are, I'm trying to build a career, trying to build business, working a lot of hours, working hard. And my time spent with my children, especially as they were younger, in their early years, was really more come home at night, help maybe give them a bath, maybe tuck them into bed, and that was pretty much it. I just because I was going all the time, and
Sure.
I think as I think they suffered as a result of that, and I'll tell you why. You know, as we look at society today, we have become truly what you almost on a majority level a fatherless uh, nation, a fatherless culture. When you think about in certain groups, more than 60% of kids are born into homes without fathers. Dads have become kind of disconnected, and I think we're seeing a result of that in young men who don't really know how to function. They don't know how to treat their wives. They don't know how to develop relationships. They don't know how to love and nurture each other, and that's a shame. So I think that it's important that we are very, very actively involved with our kids. And one of the things that I learned, because very late in life, after my 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 first two boys were in their teens, I remarried and to a woman who was a little bit younger, and she wanted to have children, and I started having children again. And at that point, though, the thing that had drastically changed in my life was that I was following Christ,
Mm.
and so I was seeking His model of fatherhood. And what I said to him was, I want to be the kind of father to my boys that you are to me. I want to be, unconditional love, kindness, caring, attention, always there for them. And so I just made just kind of a shift in the way I approached having boys. And I said, Lord, if you're going to give me another chance to have two more boys, I'm going to do this the right way, and I'm going to
Right.
make sure that my family becomes my priority. So now in life, it's God, and then family, wife and children, and then work or whatever else I'm going to do. And that's a difference. That's a big difference for me from when I
Sure.
raised my first boys.
Yeah. And what kind of I mean, where did that desire come from to want to be that different, that more present dad?
Well, I think first, of course, the realization of what Christ expects us to do as fathers, the way we're as husbands and fathers. But also, I think because I started to, you start looking around at what's going on in the world, and you start to spend time. In campus ministry, I spend a lot of time with young adult men, and I'm often just astounded at the way they think about things and at the lack of ability to really process life. They kind of, not all of them, but they kind of go about life with this attitude of whatever it is that I want to do, just get out of my way and let me do it, and not necessarily having this nurturing, caring, kind care for other people and their opinions, their thoughts, their desires, that kind of thing. And so I think part of it was just, and my wife and I talked before we started having children, and I just said, I really want my children to grow up in a home where there is a mom and a dad that are both equally involved, where as a couple we show them an example of what it looks like to live for Christ, and then I want them to. I think that what I think is important is for children to see their father love Jesus,
Hmm.
and I say that because it allows us to see that we are men and that we are determined and we are driven and we can move mountains, but we do that all in the strength of from the strength that God gives us. And I think it shows that tenderness, that meekness, that kindness that men are missing, yeah, when they grow up today. And
Hmm.
it's so important. It's so important because it'll impact how a young man grows up and becomes a follower first, a being coachable, then becomes a leader of other people, and most importantly becomes what kind of a husband and father he becomes. Let's face it, they're going to, in most cases, be the husband and father that you've set the example for.
Right. Yeah, and that, this topic has come up a lot in the group coaching program that I created. And one of the things, and I heard it, so I want to speak into it, is that how important is it for a young husband and wife to be on the same page when it comes to the type of, children, young men and women that they want to raise? And how important was it for you and Shannon to have that shared vision of like, hey, this is who we're trying to raise.
Hmm. Oh, critically important. Critically important. I think the thing that we forget in marriage is that God has said that, once we become married, we become the same flesh. So we become one with our wife, and there's no time that is more important than it is when it comes to raising children. The values, the standards, the structure of how they're going to live their life, the the boundaries that are established. We have to be on the same page, all the way down to expectations of behavior, disciplinary, processes, and it's really really important because let's just face it, kids will learn how to manipulate mom and dad against one another. But my earlier boys were very good at that. Because their mom and I weren't really on the same page, but we weren't on the same page primarily because I was gone all the time. I
Right.
wasn't there. She essentially was almost like a single mom for a long time, only because I traveled so much and I was gone so much. And then when I was there, I wasn't really engaged. And I think that is a segue. There's a segue into that discussion that I think is really important because a lot of times we're present at home, but how engaged are we? Because let's
Hmm.
face it, if you are someone who works outside the house, and maybe your wife is at home, or you get home from work, you've had a long day, and you're looking forward to just those few minutes of like, I want to unravel what else is going on in my brain today.
Yeah.
There's no such thing when you have kids.
No.
That doesn't happen. So what I tell guys all the time, I'm like, listen, before you get home, pull into a shopping center parking lot, sit in the car for 15 minutes, listen to music, pray, do whatever you have to do in order to get yourself in the mindset that when I walk through the door, it's going to be help me cook dinner, so and so needs help with their homework. I mean, there's something. There is no
Right.
downtime when you're a parent.
I really like that. It's almost like we talked about this too, of having those boundaries in place. And like
Hmm.
once you step over the threshold to your door, you have to be dad.
Your
You,
dad.
yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So how hard was it? Because like right now, my biggest challenge right now is my cell phone, and
Yeah.
learning how just to put that down, put it away, leave it on the charger, and not be on it all the time. It's an awareness I have, but it's also a habit that I've realized that I can either choose to be with Evan, my son, or be distracted by whatever it is that that day has presented to me.
Yeah, man, and
So
you hit the nail on the head because we do the distraction of being connected all the time has changed the way we see things. It's like we carry our phones because we're afraid that, oh my goodness, we're going to miss something and it might be an emergency. And in reality, 99% of the stuff that comes across could wait 2 hours.
sure.
So it becomes a mindset. It's what is our priority. So one of the things that we do is when I come home, my boys and my wife and I, we just put our phones away. We just plug them in, set them away, so that we can. One of the things that's critical to me is that we all have dinner together. And so,
Hmm.
at any time that we have that ability, if we're all home together, I like for us to sit at the table and have dinner together, to talk about the day, to talk about what's going on. We always pray together. I think it's just establishing a routine that helps young men, especially, but young children, period, recognize what the priorities are in life. And the
Hmm.
priorities are not necessarily being connected to every single text message or every Snapchat that comes in, because those things can wait. But
Oh,
but putting those ahead of your children will teach them that that's okay, because they're
sure.
picking up on everything, especially at your son's age and and really for the next 10 years, he's really going to be a sponge, and he's going to be a sponge to what daddy does. And
Hmm.
he's going to love his mom, and his mom's going to be nurturing and loving and kind. But but as men, we should be as well. We
Hmm.
should be the same way. One of the things that I think men miss out on is the affection that they show, especially to their young boys. They're like afraid to do that, maybe because they think it's. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was about 12 years old. Now, my dad was a naval officer, and he was a man's man. And I remember at about 12 years old when he told me that I was too old to hug. I used to always hug him and kiss him on the cheek, and he told me I was too old to do that, and it just broke my heart. I never said anything about it, but I was probably 25 again before I was able to comfortably hug my dad and give him a kiss on the cheek and tell him that I loved him. Because he grew up in a different environment. He didn't have a father. His father had died at a very early age, and so he kind of grew up on his own in New York, and had moved here from Italy to live with an uncle. And so just he had a rough time. But this is an example of how we emulate how we grow up.
Right.
So, although my dad wasn't an affectionate guy, he was home every night. He was very involved with me and with my sister, and he was a great father. So, and he treated my mother like she was gold, like she was the most important thing in the world to her. So, when I grew up, maybe not in my earlier years, but once I started following the Lord, in my marriage now, my wife, I treat her in a way that I want my boys to treat their wife one day, with love,
Sure.
with kindness, with caring, with affection, with meekness and and gentleness, and I try to treat my boys the same way. I show them a lot of love. I show them a lot of affection. I mean, they're not afraid when I walk into their school gym to come up and give me a hug, and you'll see that as much, in today's society. But I think
Hmm.
it's important because we're not just supervising their growth. We are molding boys to become men that will be a very positive influence in the country.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that you're much more aware, and I think this is such an important lesson that young dads should learn is you need to be aware of the beliefs that you are carrying into your marriage and carrying into your home, because
Hmm.
whether they're true or they're that limiting belief that this is the way that my dad showed me, being aware of that, because that's going to impact the way that the example that you are going to be emulating or modeling.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of men out there who had terrible dads, or they didn't have the type of dad that showed them that affection, so they're not that affectionate. But I think at a certain point you need to realize and come to grips that answer that question of what kind of man do I my wife and I want to raise? What are those
Hmm.
things that I think it's so important that if we have that idea of oh, this is who I want to raise, that's great, but that's just like step one. It's like now the real work in you as dad and husband and leader of the home really kind of sets that example of okay, now it's time to get to work. I have to show that example. That's what I'm hearing.
You're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it has to do with our identity. And I talk a lot about my identity being in Christ, of course, because we're all children of God. But I think that what's happened in the culture of America today is first, in our history over the last 20 years or so, men were told to be bold, to be strong, to not waver, to not cry, to not anything. Now men are told not to be strong, not to be bold, to be loving and kind and sweet. And I think there's just this breakdown of what is my identity. And if you try to find your identity in the world, it'll be very difficult for you to be the kind of dad that I think we need to be in order to raise really good men that have strong values and morals and integrity. So, first and foremost, to your point, yes, we are going to carry a lot of baggage from our childhood into our lives. Of course, I'm a big believer that if you become a follower of Christ, then that stuff goes away, and you start to learn how to be a son and how to emulate your Father who is God in heaven. And that then is reflected in how you raise your own children, because the Bible is very clear about us not exacerbating our kids, not my son will say sometimes, you're being annoying right now, and it catches me because sometimes I just am. Sometimes it's annoying because it's not what he wants to hear, but I just think that I don't have anything to prove to them. You know what I mean? The only thing I want to do is model the kind of behavior as a man that I hope that they will model when they become men.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't matter to me what the world says about my affection with them, about the time I spend with them. It doesn't matter to me, what my work environment or life environment tells me is the priority for me. My
Mhm.
priority is my family first. And so even as I have over the last now 15 years, my son is 15, my older one that live with me now, and my youngest is 13. And even after 15 years, when I look back on the decisions that I've made to say, I could advance in my career if I do this, I've chosen to go home and to be more active in my son's lives, even though for the first 10 years my wife stayed home. I still wanted it to be a mom and dad raising them as opposed to just mom raises me and dad gets home from work. So, and it hasn't hurt me. And I think that a lot of people get this feeling like if I'm not out at work, doing more at work, then I'm not going to succeed. But I think that balance is critically important. And God showed us how to do that by mapping out where our priorities are supposed to lie and family is supposed to be first.
Oh, I, you and I could talk about this for many hours, but I really like that example of what you and Shannon did by coming together and mapping that out, and then basing the way that you communicate, the way that you raise your kids. Uh, that example you talk about is it's there. It's just not something that you have in your head, but you put it to paper and you said, hey, these are the things that we're trying to do. And based on what we've seen in your experiences in the world, you know I like how you said it. You can either have the identity of the world and let the world raise your kids, or you as mom and dad can say, hey, we're gonna pave the way and be this example that may go against what the world currently says right now, but that's that's okay.
That's okay. It
Hmm.
sure is. It sure is. And now I have 13 and 15-year-olds who boys who love the Lord. They're not ashamed or afraid to be bold in that faith everywhere they go. We've gone through some challenges and some struggles over the past couple of years in our family, and as a result of some health issues and other things, and through it all, my boys have walked in a level of confidence in Jesus that and in His will that I'm proud of, because I think we've modeled that for them. But I'm also thrilled about it because I know that it will serve them well when they get out into the world and start facing things. That foundational understanding of who God created them to be as young men, I think, is going to stay with them.
Oh.
And someday, my goal is that someday my son's wife will come and say, thank you
Yeah.
for the man that you raised. Now
Right.
then that I mean, I want God's honor too. But I just, if my son marries a woman who comes and says to us, thank you for the way you raised him, then I know that that's another generation that's going to end up getting raised the same way. So that'll be
Oh,
wonderful.
I think that's something that I certainly look forward to my son. That's a great goal to have. Like
Yeah.
you raised a really good, great young man.
Yeah.
So wow. Well, Mike, it's been a honor and privilege, and I certainly appreciate your time taking time this morning to kind of share some of your
Absolutely.
story and what you've learned, what you've walked through, what you're seeing, and then also how you're setting the example. It's such a powerful message, but it's also I think it's something that even me being a young husband and a young dad, it's like that's the example. That's something that I
Yeah.
want to strive after. So it's good
I
to
guess.
know that all these things are kind of like, all right, I'm headed in the right direction.
Yes, you are. The one, if I could leave with one thought for guys, and this is a hard one because we tend to be masters of our own universe, but don't try to do this alone. Groups like the one that you have started, John, I think are so important. And what I would encourage men is take your pride and take your ego and just pack it away and show up at one of these gatherings of men and just have an open, frank conversation, because there's nothing better than sitting, I think, with a group of guys that are walking through the same things at different levels. So, you're the father of an 11-month-old. The next guy might be a 10-year-old, me a 15-year-old, then a 20 or 30-year-old. I think that we could help each other if we would just lower our defense systems and put our pride away and say, I'm willing to come and talk to a group of guys and say, I need help.
Yeah.
So I applaud what you're doing. I think when I first saw that you advertised this, I was like, "Wow, that is a great idea." Because I bet you're going to get a lot of guys, and I bet you'll have a lot of guys who will say that this class, this program that you're doing, changed their lives.
That's the goal. So I thank you. I'm glad that you're receiving that message because it's something that I've learned that most men try to do something on their own. I think when it comes to being a dad, you have one chance to get that right, and
Yeah,
so and it all starts with you. You may have this idea, but it's so healthy to have other dads that you can turn to and have that group, have that opportunity for you just to share what you're learning and also share the challenges because more than likely there's a dad who's kind of walked through that and
yeah,
he'll be there to help you.
absolutely,
So yeah.
absolutely.
So
It's good stuff,
well,
man.
yeah. Well, thanks. I'm sure
Yep.
this won't be the last time that I interview you because I know that you have you have so much wisdom when it comes to
Well, thank you.
leading men and leading young men. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. God bless you, man.
All right. You too, Mike. Thanks.
Take care.